Thank you. My name is Aaron Kellner. I'm the investment director at Seed Invest, and I promise you this is going to be a pretty good change of pace relative to the presentations thus far today. Seed Invest is an equity crowdfunding platform based here in New York. As it stands today, our business comprises facilitating investments by our network of accredited investors to high-quality startups. To put that definition of accredited investor in real terms, essentially that is the wealthiest 2% of Americans in this country. However, what we are mostly excited about as it stands today are some fundamental changes that are occurring and will be taking place in 2016 that will broadly expand access to this asset class and the means by which startup companies are going to be able to access funding. So first, just going to talk before diving into that, just first start with a quick overview of the problem that we're trying to solve, a little bit about Seed Invest as it stands today, as well as these upcoming changes to the regulatory landscape that we are so excited about. So at its core, fundraising is a time and energy consuming process that is a core distraction from focusing on one's business. While this is a distraction at any stage of a company's life cycle, the reality is for early companies in specific, it's a zero-sum game. Time that is spent in meeting after meeting with potential investors is time that cannot be spent focusing on one's business, arguably at the time when that should be the sole focus of the founder's life. The other kind of crux of the problem, and one that isn't recognized as much, is that VC funding and active and professional angel funding actually constitutes an amazingly small percentage of funding of early stage companies in the US. VCs are considered the end-all be-all of, if I'm going to be a successful company, it's because a VC invests in me, and if a VC doesn't invest in this company, well, then it isn't worth my time. Truth of the matter is for every company that receives a check from a venture capital firm, there are literally hundreds of companies that are funded either by friends and family, by founders digging into their personal savings accounts, or by just racking up debt on their credit cards. This is a problem that is not alien to the founding team at Seed Invest. And so we were early supporters and helped secure passage of the Jobs Act in April of 2012. The Jobs Act stands for Jumpstart Our Business Startups Act and was passed with the intention of stimulating economic growth by making it easier for entrepreneurs to access capital. While we were doing that, we were also building a proprietary technology platform from the ground up to help facilitate and streamline as many aspects of the capital formation process as possible. So through Seed Invest, one can discover deals, conduct diligence, communicate with companies, actually fund and execute investments in early stage companies, as well as ensure that all of the regulatory considerations that need to be satisfied are satisfied so that these offerings are conducted in a regulatorily compliant fashion. While we're not the only people doing this, we are taking, admittedly, a bit of the road less traveled. A lot of this stems from the fact that we operate through a broker-dealer, so we are an SEC and FINRA-regulated entity like any major bank. We take a very stout quality over quantity approach to how we approach this space. We conduct multi-tiered independent diligence on every company that lists on the platform. We've been at it for about 3 years at this point. Over that time, about 5,000 companies have applied to list on our platform. Only 1% of them have actually made it through our vetting process and have gained exposure to our network of investors. While it's still a little kind of too early in the game for anybody to pat themselves on the back for anything yet, we do think that our approach fundamentally has drawn a bit more of a sophisticated or professional investor to our platform, as demonstrated by the fact that the average investment on our platform up until this point is over $50,000. This average is about 5 to 10 times higher what you're seeing from the majority of other players that are in our space. So that's the one side of the market. On the other side of the market are the companies that we're helping. Over the same time frame, we've helped raise money for about 50 companies. While only 1% of the companies are able to make it onto our platform, over 90% of those that do are able to successfully meet their fundraising goals, with the average contribution from Seed Invest and our investors in excess of $500,000. We have raised money for companies ranging from consumer tech, enterprise software, robotics, cryptocurrency, new space technology. So we really do range the gamut on that side of things. The problem is that the investors with whom we are engaged, the investors that these companies can raise from, has still been restricted to only the wealthiest Americans. Again, the 2% that meet the definition of an accredited investor. But the game is starting to change in the country. We're a little bit behind the rest of the world, but we are catching up, and there are some really, again, fundamental changes that are occurring in the regulatory landscape that are going to revolutionize capital formation in this country. Title III of the Jobs Act was actually approved by the SEC about 3 weeks ago and is going to be going into effect in May of next year. This is going to allow early stage companies to raise up to $1 million from both accredited and non-accredited investors, so anybody that wants to invest can. Title IV actually already went into effect in June of this past year. And allows companies to raise up to $50 million from both accredited and non-accredited investors. The primary point of differentiation between these Regulation A+ offerings, which we've kind of internally dubbed mini IPOs, relative to both a crowdfunding offering as well as private placements that are taking place every day in this country, is that companies need to file and register with the SEC before actually raising these funds, akin to a company going public. However, the filing process is a bit more scaled down. And this really isn't just about companies being able to raise money from all Americans, as well as all Americans being able to invest in what has been, over the past 20 years, the best performing asset class overall. This is a potentially hyper-efficient way for companies to raise money from their early supporters, from their early backers, as well as the fact that there are benefits beyond the money that's being put in. Money is good, quick money is even better. But Bain & Company actually released a study showing that investors in public companies spend 54% more in companies that they also own and are 2 times more likely to recommend those companies to their networks. These are statistics related to multi-billion-dollar, potentially blue-chip stocks. Imagine the propensity for people to share their excitement about an early-stage company that they just backed for $500. We've done studies. We have an accredited investor network of over 14,000 individuals, VCs, family offices, et cetera. We also, at this stage of the game, probably about 20 or 30,000 non-accredited investors in our network as well. And we polled them ahead of these upcoming changes to the regulatory landscape to see whether or not there really was appetite for these type of offerings. And unequivocally, we found the answer is yes. People want to invest in these. They anticipate doing so multiple times a year and are quite excited to do so. We've actually been able to take this one step further, though. Filing with the SEC, conducting one of these mini IPOs, it's not a decision to be taken lightly. It costs tens of thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours of work to actually get through this process. So the SEC kind of threw everybody a bone and said, before you go through this process, what we're going to allow you to do is gauge market demand and test the waters. Throw a hypothetical situation out to people and say, hey, we're not looking for you to invest right now, but if we were, would you want to? And if so, how much do you think you would want to invest? We were the first platform to host one of these testing the waters campaigns on in the country and have held a couple thereafter. And what we found across these 3 campaigns is that these companies garnered almost $35 million of indications of interest from over 8,000 individuals, indicating on average $4,000 per indication. The first company in the country to do this way better reached out to their 270,000 customers and within 2 days received almost $10 million of interest from 3,000 individuals. Like I said, we're a little bit behind the ball in the country when it comes to crowdfunding. In reality, we're just going to be growing a growing global market that we expect to accelerate when America is joined into the fold. A kind of now known quote by a very well-known venture capitalist, Fred Wilson, here in New York, noted that with $30 trillion sitting in U.S. savings account, a mere 1% shift to early stage investments and small businesses represents a $300 billion opportunity. To the same end, a lot of people kind of don't recognize or fully appreciate the fact that despite the rapport that venture capitalists have in the country, friends and families actually invest more in early stage companies on an annual basis than the entire venture capital industry combined. So bringing those investments online in a more regulated market is something that we're looking forward to as well. It also comes in the midst of a few secular changes that are providing a tailwind as well. For all the talk of the rise of the robo-advisors and how much millennials like them, at the end of the day, millennials actually don't really like the stock market relative to their older counterparts and are much more likely to utilize crowdfunding as well. There's also been a demonstrated shift that is likely to continue into alternative assets, all the early stage investments included, and as people are kind of taking their own destiny as it pertains to their investments, we see more making investments into this as well. I will go through the last slide very quickly, but Goldman Sachs did release a report on the basically big changes that are taking place in the fintech space, whether you're talking about payments, peer-to-peer lending, and crowdfunding. What they found, and despite the fact that there already are some very well-known multi-billion-dollar publicly traded companies in a number of these verticals, based on Goldman's estimation, those verticals in aggregate do not represent the immediately addressable opportunity that can be found in crowdfunding. So again, these regulations are going to be coming online in full force next year, and we ourselves are quite excited for it. So that's my time.
Thank you. I hope you're taking advantage of having Seed Invest here at the conference. I urge you to do so. We're now going to hear from Dr. Sam Olof and then Dr. Frida Poli, and then we're going to break for lunch a little bit later, but than we planned, but we're going to push lunch a little bit longer. Dr. Sam Olof.
Hello, everybody. You're not hallucinating. This isn't a hunger-induced trick that your ears are playing. I'm actually English. In addition to being a suit wearer, I'm actually a scientist. So I currently wear two hats. I'm split between the University of Oxford Chemistry Department and Oxi Bio, Oxford Synthetic Biology. And so in less than 10 minutes, hopefully, I am going to take you through why we're interested in printing artificial tissues. So this is an image of a 3D printer creating an artificial tissue. So just to indulge some patriotism here, that's the Queen's face on a penny. This is about 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. This glass cuvette you can see here, that's about the size of a sugar cube. And we can see, hopefully in the middle of this image, an artificial tissue that's got branches inside it. Why are we interested in artificial tissues? He says, pressing a button frantically. Great. Here's 6 reasons why we're interested in artificial tissues. There are a multitude of diseases that affect the basic functioning of your body. Just as an example, here's a few of them. Acute pulmonary diseases, liver failure, diabetes, blindness, cardiomyopathy. And so we can treat some of these diseases with drugs, with small molecules. We've already heard about some of those today. But some of the time, you need to just take some of that tissue out and replace it with another one. But transplant organs are in increasingly short supply because the world's getting safer. So we have been developing technology for the last 5 years in Oxford, which in addition to being the film set for Harry Potter is also a university. And we actually have one of the biggest chemistry departments in Western Europe. We've got 2,000 researchers based there. We've got a few great success stories from the university. I'm sure a few of you are aware of Oxford Nanopore, which is a disruptive gene sequencing technology, which actually originated out of our lab. So that combines some biological components with some technological components, and they've produced a disruptive gene sequencer the size of an iPhone. Casting over to the right here, this is the cover of Science that we got a couple of years ago, showing an artificial tissue. So this is a soft, 3-dimensional structure that was printed like a petal and folded up to close in on itself. So Oxi Bio has a vision that combines these 3 elements. We think that there is incredible technology in Oxford. There's great people. We think there's clearly a need for prosthetic organs, is what we'll call them for now. And for these to combine some synthetic and biological components. So obviously, I'm an academic, so I'm going to give you a quick crash course in some stuff you don't know about yet. So on the top left here is our 3D printer. And really, conceptually, it's not particularly complicated. It's a glass nozzle that produces a small drop of water. Inside that, we can place cells. We can place functional therapeutics like nanoparticles, proteins. But essentially, a tissue is a small collection of well-defined droplets that are linked together. That can be a human tissue. That can be a synthetic tissue. That's a core design principle. So this was the image that I showed you down here. So effectively, that's a soft robot. That's a folding structure made out of small droplets that's able to move. So that, even though is built from a very simple conceptual droplet model, it has emergent function, which is movement. Top right here, you'd be forgiven for thinking that's just a jelly cube with a green line through the middle of it. This is actually a non-cellular mimic of a nerve. So this green channel that runs through the middle of this printed structure conducts electric current in a way very similar to a nerve. And for those of you who've ever seen what a nerve looks like down a microscope, it has an arborized structure. It's a posh way of saying it looks a bit like a tree. It's got a top and a bottom and a linking structure in between. So one thing to bear in mind as we're talking about this is just because something has one design in a natural system doesn't mean that you can't have the same function in a completely synthetic context. And what we've been working on for the last 3 years in parallel to this is actually just printing cells. So the advances in the fields of stem cell technologies have been in the news over the last 5 years, and it's staggering what is possible. And I think when you consider how this is converging with the accelerating fields of biotechnology, I think the promise is massive. And so we'd be loath to ignore the printing of cells in addition to creating synthetic tissues. And so really, we sit in this interface of a 3D platform printing technology, the ability to print cells into functional tissues, and the ability to mimic tissues using components that are completely non-cellular. And so, again, this is what a high-resolution tissue printing structure looks like when the printer's running. So each one of these droplets is about the width of a human hair. So this is one of the higher resolution printing techniques available. I think from engineering, you may be aware that most printing or manufacturing methodologies need additional components to hold the structure together as you're printing, which is why we print in liquid. So we print a liquid droplet into a liquid. It's essentially a fancy vinaigrette. But we're able to create these ultrafine 3D structures. And so the total size of this block is 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter. So this gives us fantastic resolution if you're trying to mimic a natural system. And that's what you need if you're going to attempt to recreate biology on a length scale that's relevant. This is what I was talking about before. This is essentially a soft robot made of droplets that's able to move. And the only stimulus here is the movement of water from an area of high salt to low salt. So all this is osmosis happening. So in the course of 15 minutes, this dumb material is able to fold in on itself, and the only thing that's changing is a water flow across it. Likewise, I've already described a nerve. So if we take small droplet compartments and introduce a pore that we've taken out of a toxin, it's a funnel-shaped protein that's able to enable solvated hydrogen to move from one compartment to another, and that carries a current. And calcium ions move in the other direction, and that's how you get a current flow through this system. And so in our right-angled channel here, we've got thousands upon thousands of these small pores that are able to carry the current from the left over here to the right over here. And so even though that doesn't look like a nerve, it performs the function of a nerve, but it's a three-dimensional tissue. And so what we've been working on recently is how we could take that powerful prototyping technology and combine it with some of the biology that's being done across the world. So this is where we get into cell printing. So these are the same soft three-dimensional droplet structures into which we've loaded human kidney cells in this instance. And so we can print them as a homogeneous square. Green is good. That means they're happy and alive. Red is dead. Of course, natural cellular processes mean that a small percentage of your cells are dying all the time. So this is a normal, balanced system of live and dead cells. Because we've got this resolution, we can start printing very fine arborized structures, so we can begin to mimic natural systems. And these tissues are able to grow and proliferate in a natural way over the course of multiple weeks. So I'm going to introduce our team. So Professor Bailey couldn't actually be here today, and he sends his apologies. But we've got Dr. Hadrian Green, our CEO, sat at the back of the room. So he and I are both here to meet, talk to the many talented and interesting people in this room and work out where 3D printing of soft materials could be interesting in anything from regenerative medicine through to biotechnology applications. And so that I don't take any of your more time between now and lunch, I'm just going to leave you with Oxford Synthetic Biology. We're aiming to make synthetic biology real. More information can be found on our website, or if you email at info@oxibio, and we'd be happy to talk to you in person in the lunch break. Thank you.